The first crack of Derek Hall's hand against Emily Parker's cheek split the quiet of Asheville's Maple Hollow Drive like a lightning bolt on a blue sky day. Emily staggered against the porch column, her hazel eyes wide with shock, blood pooling at the corner of her lip. The wind rustled crimson leaves across the sidewalk, but the homes lining the street remained still. Curtains twitched. Lights flickered. No doors opened. No voices called out. "Say it again!" Derek snarled, his voice low and dangerous, his broad frame casting a shadow that swallowed her whole. Emily's breath hitched. She didn't beg. Not anymore. Inside the house across the street, 7-year-old Lucy Tanner clutched her stuffed rabbit and stared from behind her bedroom curtain. Her grandmother Martha stood frozen by the phone, fingers hovering over the numbers. But it was the low growl from the backyard that broke the stillness. A second later, the heavy slam of wood splintering echoed from the garden shed. And then a blur. Black and tan muscle and fury storming through the fallen leaves like judgment itself. Buddy had been waiting. Now let's begin the story of how a silent angel changed everything. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from. Now, let's begin the story of how a silent angel changed everything. It was an early October morning in Asheville, North Carolina, and the town seemed dipped in a soft amber light. The air was crisp, the kind that bit at the tip of your nose but made sweaters feel like armor. Trees lining Sycamore Lane were ablaze with color scarlet gold and rust, shedding their leaves in lazy spirals across the cracked sidewalks. The Blue Ridge Mountains framed the town like an old oil painting, solid and unmoving. It was the kind of morning that made everything feel safe, which made it all the more cruel. Emily Parker stood by the kitchen window of the modest 2-story house she shared with her husband, watching a squirrel dart across their front yard. She sipped lukewarm coffee from a chipped mug and pretended for just a second that she lived someone else's life. Emily was 29, tall, with delicate bones and a quiet grace. Her ash-blonde hair was pinned in a loose bun at the nape of her neck, and her pale complexion held the translucent quality of someone who spent more time under artificial light than sunlight. A pediatric nurse by trade, Emily had once been known for her colorful scrubs, and warm laugh children adored her. And she had a knack for making even the most anxious parents relax. But that was before the wedding. Before the bruises, before her voice had learned to tremble when it rose above a whisper. Now she wore beige, not just in her clothes, but in the way she moved, the way she avoided mirrors, the way she apologized for simply existing. Her posture bent slightly forward, not from physical injury, but from 2 years of emotional erosion. She rarely laughed, and if she did, it never reached her eyes. Her husband, Derek Hall, was still asleep upstairs. He was 36, ruggedly handsome in a way that drew admiration from both men and women in town. He worked as a licensed electrician and had built a reputation for reliability and charisma. Broad-shouldered with a square jaw and short, neatly trimmed dark hair, Derek was the kind of man people called a provider. The kind who helped a neighbor move a couch or fixed a flickering light in the church foyer without being asked. His voice was steady calm, his smile charming. But only outside the house. Inside, Derek's voice could chill the marrow of Emily's bones. He didn't raise it often, that wasn't his way. He preferred silence as a weapon, precision as punishment. He noticed when she overcooked the pasta by 20 seconds or didn't fold the towels his way. Sometimes he would grip her arm hard enough to leave finger-shaped bruises. Sometimes he would whisper, "No one would believe you, Emily." And she knew terrifyingly that he was right, because outside he was perfect, and inside he was the storm. A knock at the front door startled her. Emily froze, heart skipping. She glanced at the stairs, still quiet. Another knock. Then a small voice. "Miss Emily, I brought you flowers." Emily let out a breath and opened the door. There stood little Lucy Marston, 7 years old, from the house next door. She had flyaway strawberry blonde curls and freckles that spilled across her cheeks like powdered cinnamon. dressed in a hoodie too big for her tiny frame, and holding a clumsy bouquet of crushed daisies and goldenrod. Lucy was the picture of childhood sincerity. "I picked them from the side of the road," Lucy said proudly. "Mama says you like flowers." "I do," Emily replied, managing a small smile. Her voice was warm but quiet. She took the bouquet and crouched slightly. "They're beautiful." "Thank you." Lucy frowned slightly. "You look sad today." Emily's smile faltered. "Do I?" The little girl nodded solemnly. "You always smile with your mouth, but not your eyes." Emily swallowed hard. Children had a way of seeing straight through pretense. She reached out and gently brushed a leaf from Lucy's shoulder. "I'm just tired," she said. Lucy stared at her for a second longer as if deciding whether to believe that answer. Then she brightened. "I'll draw you a picture. With a rainbow and a dog. I'd like that very much." "Okay." "Bye, Miss Emily." Lucy skipped off the porch and down the street, leaving Emily standing in the doorway with the bouquet pressed gently to her chest. The flowers were already wilting, but they meant more than any bouquet she had ever received from Derek. As Emily stepped back inside and shut the door softly, she heard the creak of floorboards above. Derek was awake. She moved quickly, placing the flowers in a mason jar and setting them on the windowsill. Then she began reheating his coffee. Not because he asked for it, but because if she didn't, there would be consequences, spoken or otherwise. Her phone buzzed. A text message from her sister Michelle in Chicago. "Are you okay? Haven't heard from you in a while. I'm getting worried. Please call me. Love you." Emily stared at the message. Her finger hovered over the screen, but she didn't reply. She couldn't. Derek had access to her phone records. And besides, she didn't have the words. Later that afternoon, after Derek left for a job at the Hendersons' new guest house, Emily stepped into the backyard and sat down beside the garden bed she used to love tending. Now the soil was dry and most of the herbs had withered, but one thing still bloomed: fear. From the corner of the yard, Buddy barked once. Emily glanced up and saw the neighbor's German shepherd standing behind the fence. He was an older dog with a black and tan coat graying around the snout and intelligent amber eyes. He watched her quietly, tail thumping once. They had an understanding, she thought. Buddy had seen her cry once, really cry, while she was hanging laundry. He had whined softly and pressed his snout against the fence slats. Since then, whenever she came out, he came too. He didn't bark unnecessarily or demand attention. He just watched her, like he knew. "Hey there, boy," Emily whispered, crouching by the fence. She reached through and scratched behind his ear. Buddy closed his eyes briefly, leaning into her touch. For a moment, she didn't feel invisible. From the porch, the wind chimes rang softly as a breeze passed through. The mountains loomed in the distance, ancient and unbothered. But inside her, something stirred. A flicker of awareness, of resistance. She looked at Buddy, at the half-dead garden, at the flowers from Lucy now drooping in the jar. And for the first time in months, Emily Parker let herself imagine something different. The next morning brought with it a light drizzle that clung to the window panes and muted the colors of Asheville's otherwise vivid autumn palette. Emily pulled on a gray hoodie over her scrubs and stepped into the hallway, quietly careful not to wake Derek. His toolbox still sat by the door, the latch slightly unhooked from the night before. He hadn't spoken a word to her at dinner. That silence, though quieter than a scream, had weighed even heavier, after leaving a hastily scribbled note on the counter, "Out for gas." Back soon, she slipped out into the morning mist. The gas station at the edge of Sycamore Lane was just over a mile away. Emily often chose to walk when she could. It gave her time to breathe, or at least pretend to. The station was run by a man named Carl Jensen, a weathered but kind-eyed retiree in his mid-60s with salt and pepper hair and thick eyebrows that gave him a perpetually puzzled expression. Carl wore a worn navy flannel and jeans that had seen decades of sun and grease. He nodded at Emily as she approached, a slow half-smile forming beneath his mustache. "Mornin', Emily," he greeted, wiping his hands on a rag. "You're out early. Had to fill up." Derek's truck ran low again, she replied softly. Carl's eyes flicked toward the end of the building where a small covered carport held a stack of tires, a broken soda machine, and a battered metal dog bowl. "He's still there," he said, tilting his chin. Emily turned. Curled near the rusted base of the soda machine was a German shepherd, thin, soaked, and motionless, except for the slow, deliberate blink of his golden brown eyes. His ribs were visible through matted fur, and his ears, though upright, looked tired from holding their shape for too long. Rain beaded on his coat, and the metal tag on his collar clinked softly as he shifted. Something in the dog's eyes stopped her. They weren't wild or afraid. They were aware, watchful, not begging, just waiting. Carl walked over and stood beside her. He showed up 6 days ago. No chip, no leash. Just that tag says, "Buddy." I've been feeding him scraps, but he won't come close. Won't leave either, like he's waiting for someone who never came back. Emily crouched a few feet away. "Has anyone tried calling the number on the tag disconnected?" Carl said. "I reckon he's been dumped." The dog's eyes followed Emily's every movement as she slowly lowered her hand, palm up, inches from the ground. "Hey, buddy," she said gently. "I won't hurt you." The dog didn't move. Minutes passed like that rain drumming on the awning traffic in the distance, the faint smell of gasoline and wet asphalt, until finally Buddy pushed himself to his feet. He took 2 steps forward, cautious but unafraid, and pressed his wet nose into her palm. Emily's heart twisted. She felt the tremble in his breath, the coldness of his fur, and something else, an unspoken recognition, like they were both just bones wrapped in silence. Carl handed her a towel and a slice of turkey from the staff fridge. "Might help," he said, not unkindly. Buddy ate it slowly, almost politely, and when Emily rose to leave, he followed. "Wait," Carl called after them. "You taking him with you? I don't know," she answered honestly. I can't leave him here." Carl nodded once. No judgment in his weathered face. "Be careful, Emily." She didn't answer. Back home, she led Buddy through the alley gate and into the backyard. The old shed by the garden hadn't been used in months, not since Derek insisted she stop wasting time on basil and stupid rosemary. Emily pulled open the warped wooden door, revealing the cluttered but dry interior. An old quilt lay on a broken lawn chair, and a cracked water jug sat in the corner. Buddy sniffed around cautiously, then settled in the far corner, curling into a tight ball. Emily crouched beside him. "I'll bring food later," she whispered. "But you have to be quiet, okay? No barking." Buddy didn't respond, but his eyes met hers, and something in her chest softened for the first time in a long while. She slipped back into the house just as Derek emerged from the shower, a towel wrapped around his waist and steam trailing behind him. His broad frame filled the hallway, and his eyes narrowed as he saw her. "Where were you?" he asked, voice calm in a way that set her on edge. "Getting gas," she replied, holding up the receipt like a lifeline. He didn't respond, just brushed past her, water dripping onto the hardwood floor. "Clean the bathroom later. There's mold by the tub." Emily nodded. "Okay." That night, after Derek went to bed, Emily crept outside with a plate of scrambled eggs and a bowl of clean water. Buddy stood when he saw her, wagging his tail once before sitting again as if to say, "I'm patient. I'm here." She sat with him for nearly an hour, not speaking, just listening to the wind through the trees and the soft rustle of Buddy's breathing. At one point, she reached out and stroked behind his ears, and he leaned into her touch with a sigh so human it broke her heart. From the upstairs window, the curtain in the master bedroom shifted slightly. By late October, the rain had settled in as a near-constant companion in Asheville. Heavy clouds loomed over the mountains, casting a gray film over the streets and homes, as though the sky itself were reluctant to lift its gaze. The trees, once vibrant in reds and golds, now dropped their leaves like secrets too heavy to hold. Emily felt the weather suited her, dull, wet, and forgotten. Each day passed with mechanical routine: wake, cook, clean, obey. She moved like a shadow through the house, barely speaking, always listening. Derek had grown more distant, yet more controlling. He monitored the volume of her phone calls, checked the odometer on her car, and began asking questions that weren't really questions. Why'd it take you 40 minutes to pick up milk? Or, who were you smiling at in the parking lot? It had been 6 days since Emily had brought Buddy home. 6 quiet days. She fed him after dark, kept the shed locked during the day, and brushed straw off his coat each night. The dog never barked, never whined. But every time Derek came near the backyard, Buddy stiffened. Once, when Derek walked out to dump garbage near the fence, Buddy growled a low, restrained sound, but loud enough to make Emily's blood run cold. Derek froze. What was that? Emily had responded quickly, heart hammering. Probably a stray near the alley. I'll check later. Derek's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. That night, Emily sat on the cold shed floor beside Buddy, her knees pulled to her chest. She whispered, "He suspects something." Buddy laid his head on her lap in response. His breath was warm and his weight grounded her in a way nothing else could. In the absence of words, she found comfort in presence. But the illusion of safety was short-lived. 3 nights later, Derek came home early. Emily had just finished cleaning the upstairs bathroom when she heard the door slam below. He stormed up the stairs, his boots leaving wet prints on the wooden steps. "I checked your phone," he said flatly as he reached the top. Emily's breath caught. "Why?" He tossed it onto the bed. "You texted your sister." Emily's eyes darted to the phone. A single unsent message blinked on the screen. "Can I come to Chicago for Thanksgiving?" "I didn't send it," she said quickly. "I just typed it." Derek's face remained unreadable, but his voice dropped to a whisper, a more dangerous tone than any shout. "You think you can just leave? Tell people I'm some kind of monster?" "No," she said, backing away. "I wasn't." He grabbed her arm hard enough to bruise and shoved her backward. She stumbled over the rug, her hand catching the corner of the dresser. There was a loud crack. Pain bloomed instantly in her wrist. She fell to her knees, gasping, cradling her arm. Derek stood still, chest heaving. For a long second, he looked almost regretful. Almost. Then he turned away and muttered, "Clean up your mess," before disappearing down the stairs. Emily's vision blurred. She curled over her wrist, which was already swelling. Each breath hurt. But worse than the physical pain was the realization if she didn't leave soon, she might never get the chance. The next morning at the urgent care clinic on the corner of Lexington Avenue, a young doctor examined her wrist. His name was Dr. Caleb Nguyen, a gentleman in his early 30s with soft eyes behind round glasses and a calm voice that could lower anyone's blood pressure. Vietnamese-American short and trim Caleb had grown up in Asheville and returned after med school to serve his hometown. "What happened?" he asked as he gently palpated her forearm. "I slipped," Emily lied quickly. "On the stairs." Caleb didn't look convinced. "Did you hit anything on the way down? I think the dresser." "It's fine. I'm just clumsy." Caleb's silence was long. He finally nodded and marked something on the chart. "Hairline fracture. You'll need a cast. I'll get the nurse." Outside the exam room, a uniformed officer stood near the desk sipping coffee and chatting with the receptionist. Officer Jacob Wells, lean mid-40s, always looked like he'd slept in his patrol jacket. His sandy hair was thinning on top, and his brown eyes were sharp behind crow's feet. Despite his relaxed demeanor, Jacob noticed things. He'd been a beat cop in Asheville for nearly 20 years, and he'd developed a gut instinct for things that didn't add up. He recognized Emily immediately. He had seen her once before, months ago, when she'd come in with bruises on her ribs and said she'd fallen off the porch. He hadn't believed it then, and he didn't now. When Caleb walked out and nodded discreetly toward Emily's file, Jacob's expression changed. He walked slowly to Emily's room and knocked once. "Ma'am." She turned startled. Her arm was now in a cast, resting in a sling. "Just wanted to make sure everything's all right," Jacob said. "Saw you were in the ER again." Emily nodded quickly. "Just an accident." Jacob tilted his head. "You sure I can help if something's going on?" "No," she whispered. "I'm fine." He stared at her for a moment, then pulled a business card from his pocket and slid it onto the tray beside her purse. "My number's on there, just in case you remember it differently tomorrow." That night, Emily returned home with the painkillers still sealed in her purse. Derek didn't speak a word when he saw the cast. He only said, "You're lucky you didn't break your neck," and walked out back to smoke. In the shed, Buddy rose immediately when she arrived. His ears perked. He sniffed her sling and whimpered. Emily knelt beside him, wincing, and rested her head on his shoulder. "I don't know how much longer I can do this," she whispered. From across the fence, a pair of glowing eyes watched them. A black cat, lean and curious, darted past its presence, unnoticed by all except Buddy. For a moment, Emily almost laughed. Almost. The wind had shifted in Asheville, bringing with it a sharper chill that curled through the creaking wood of Emily's house. At night, the temperature dropped quickly, and the shed behind the garden grew colder with every passing day. Yet each evening, after Derek had fallen asleep, Emily made her way to the backyard wrapped in a borrowed coat, her wrists still sore beneath the sling. She walked silently through the back door and down the garden path, the porch light barely reaching the shed's door, which she now opened without a sound. Inside, Buddy waited for her. Always. His black and tan coat had begun to recover its luster under her care. His body remained lean but not gaunt anymore, and his amber eyes seemed brighter. He would rise as soon as she stepped in, tail wagging, once a quiet acknowledgement of her presence. Sometimes that small motion was all she needed to hold herself together. Emily would sit on the floor with him, her back against the cracked wall, her breath visible in the cold air. She'd wrap herself in an old quilt she'd snuck out of the linen closet, and Buddy would lie beside her head, sometimes resting gently on her thigh. She spoke to him in whispers, not always in words, but in sighs, half-thoughts, fractured memories. And he listened. No judgment, no interruptions, no disbelief. Only warmth and stillness. Some nights she cried softly, tears falling onto her cast or his fur, and Buddy would nuzzle her gently, a subtle reminder that she was not invisible here. Other nights she would tell him stories, small ones about her childhood in Illinois, about how she once wanted to open her own pediatric clinic, or how she used to sing "You Are My Sunshine" to every newborn she held, stories she hadn't said aloud in years. On the fourth night of this new ritual, something unexpected happened. "Miss Emily." A small voice pierced the darkness, and Emily's body tensed. She turned and saw Lucy Marston standing just outside the shed door, wrapped in a pink hoodie with a flashlight clutched tightly in her hands. Her hair was tucked into a knitted cap, and she looked both nervous and fascinated. "I saw you come out here," the little girl whispered. "I followed." "Sorry." Emily's heart pounded. She stepped out quickly, gently closing the shed behind her. "Lucy. Sweetheart, you shouldn't be out this late." Lucy's eyes were wide with curiosity. "Is that your dog?" "No," Emily said, her voice hushed. "He's just staying with me for a little while. But no one can know, okay?" Lucy nodded solemnly. "I promise. Cross my heart." She paused, then added, "He's really pretty." Emily smiled. "He is. Does he have a name, Buddy?" Lucy beamed. "That's a good name. I'm going to make him something." Emily crouched down, ignoring the ache in her wrist. "Like what, a scarf?" "Mama taught me how to knit. He looks like he'd like something warm." Emily stared at the child for a long moment, then pulled her into a gentle hug. "Thank you." The next evening, Lucy returned with a tiny bundle of blue and white yarn, slightly uneven, but full of love. Buddy sniffed it, then allowed Emily to wrap it around his neck. He wore it like royalty, regal and proud beneath the dim shed light. Lucy clapped her hands with delight. From that night on, the three shared a quiet bond. Lucy never told anyone, not even her mother, a worn-out waitress with soft features and tired eyes named Monica. Monica Marston was rarely home before midnight and often too exhausted to ask many questions. She trusted Lucy's goodness and her strange ability to read people, a gift that had surfaced after the girl's father left 2 years earlier. Since then, Lucy had grown into a thoughtful, intuitive child, more observant than most adults. Meanwhile, Emily began to write. It started with a single page. She had dug out an old notebook from beneath her bed, one Derek had never noticed, and kept it hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the shed. Each night after talking to Buddy, she would write. Not poetry, not diary entries filled with dreams, but facts, incidents, dates, what Derek had said, what he'd done, how many bruises, how many lies. It was evidence, a written map of her pain. It terrified her to keep it, but it terrified her more to keep living without a plan. In one entry she wrote, October 24th. He grabbed my arm when he found the draft to Michelle. Said I was lucky he didn't do worse. I didn't respond. Buddy growled for the first time, loud enough to be heard inside. October 26th. He questioned the groceries, said I was hiding something. I wasn't. But I am now. I'm hiding Buddy. I'm hiding a version of myself that he doesn't own. Buddy would rest his head beside her as she wrote, never interfering, as though he understood that her silence on paper was more powerful than a scream. On the 7th night, as Emily fed him cooked chicken wrapped in paper towels, she spoke more firmly than usual. I'm leaving, she said aloud for the first time. Not today, but soon. Buddy looked up. His tail wagged once. And you're coming with me. That night, Derek didn't go to sleep right away. He stayed up watching TV, his beer bottles clinking together with careless rhythm. Emily sat stiffly in bed, the notebook burning beneath the mattress, Buddy's warmth still on her fingertips. Outside, a new sound stirred the night air, the low cry of a stray cat, black, lean, and sharp-eyed, padding along the fence near the shed. Buddy growled softly from inside, protective but quiet. Emily's world was still dangerous, but for the first time she wasn't alone in it. The morning light filtered through the kitchen blinds in stripes, casting pale gold across the countertops as Emily stirred a pot of oatmeal. Her wrist, still wrapped in its sling, moved awkwardly but with quiet determination. She had slept poorly the night before, haunted by the weight of her own whisper, I'm leaving. It had lingered in the air long after she left the shed, trailing her like a scent even Buddy couldn't trace. That afternoon, as she walked home from the pharmacy with a small paper bag of bandages and antiseptic for her still healing wrist, Emily found a plain manila envelope tucked into her mailbox, postmarked from Chicago. Her breath caught when she saw the familiar looping script Michelle Parker, her older sister, 7 years her senior, who had left Asheville years ago and never looked back. Emily glanced around before slipping the envelope under her coat and hurrying inside. In the bathroom door locked, she sat on the closed toilet and carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a short, handwritten letter on lilac stationery and a folded $300 bill stack along with a bus ticket dated 3 days from now. Dearest M, you don't owe anyone your silence. You don't owe anyone your bruises or your fear. You always have a place here, no matter how long it's been. Come home. Love, Michelle. Emily covered her mouth with her good hand, tears stinging her eyes. She pressed the letter to her chest. For a moment, the room was silent except for the faint ticking of the wall clock and her own trembling breath. She didn't have long. Derek would be back from the hardware store by evening. Opening the loose floorboard beneath the bathroom sink, one she had discovered by accident when scrubbing months ago, she placed the envelope and its contents inside, covering it with a folded towel and a bar of unused soap. She stared at it for a long time, then closed the cabinet gently and flushed the toilet to mask any sound. What she didn't know was that a small black dot sat high in the corner of the bathroom mirror frame, almost invisible. A pinhole camera, installed 3 weeks earlier by Derek. Derek Hall returned home just after 6 p.m., the familiar creak of his boots announcing his presence. His square jaw was unshaven, His denim jacket stained with grease, and his eyes, once charming, were colder now, more calculated. He dropped a box of screws and electrical tape onto the dining table and asked nothing about her day. But Emily sensed something different, something off. He watched her longer than usual when she handed him his beer. His fingers lingered too long on the glass. His smile, if it could be called that, was too smooth. Still, she cooked. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans with garlic. His favorite meal, one he used to request on birthdays. She hoped it might disarm him. Slow the storm she felt rising. "I was thinking," she said cautiously as they ate, "maybe we could drive out to Black Mountain this weekend. You liked that lake, remember?" Derek didn't answer immediately. He chewed slowly, watching her. "That sounds nice," he said finally. But the tone was too calm. His fork clicked loudly against his plate. After dinner, he went to the garage, claiming he needed to fix a socket wrench. Emily cleaned up, hands trembling. When she passed by the bathroom, she noticed the cabinet door slightly ajar. Her stomach dropped. She rushed inside, pulled up the floorboard. The envelope was gone. In the shed that night, Emily's hand shook as she fed Buddy. The German shepherd sat upright, sensing the shift in her posture. His ears perked, his body alert. "He knows," she whispered. "He knows everything." Buddy whined lowly and nudged her cast gently. Emily reached out, burying her face into his fur. "I messed up. I should have burned it." The next morning, Derek didn't go to work. He stood in the kitchen, sipping coffee, his phone in one hand, the other resting on the countertop. "Sleep well?" he asked casually. Emily nodded, afraid to speak. "I checked the bathroom last night," he continued. "Guess what I found?" She said nothing. "A nice little letter, bus ticket, $300. He walked slowly toward her. "Was it worth it, Em? All that planning?" She tried to step back, but he caught her wrist. Not the broken one, he was too smart for that now. "You lied to me. Again." "I wasn't," she began, but he silenced her with a look. "Do you think people believe you that you're a victim?" He scoffed. "You're nothing without me." Then he let go, walked away. As if it was enough to just remind her he could. At noon, Derek left the house. He didn't say where he was going. Emily watched from the window, breath shallow as his truck disappeared around the corner. With trembling hands, she grabbed her phone and called Michelle. No answer. Straight to voicemail, she left a message. "He knows. He found the letter. I don't know what to do." She deleted it seconds later. He checked her call log sometimes. Later that day, Lucy appeared by the shed after school, her tiny purple backpack bouncing as she skipped over the leaves. "Buddy looks sad," she said, rubbing his ear. Emily nodded. "He knows something bad's coming." Lucy's brow furrowed. "My mom says when dogs growl at people, it's 'cause they smell something wrong. I think Buddy smells your husband." Emily couldn't help but laugh, though it came out shaky. "I think he does too." Lucy pulled something from her backpack, a drawing. It showed Buddy wearing the scarf she'd made, standing beside a stick figure woman with blonde hair and a big smile. "This is you," Lucy said. "But happy." Emily bent down and hugged her. "That means more than you know." That evening Derek returned, quiet, cordial, too much so. He handed her flowers, cheap ones from the gas station, and said he'd made dinner reservations for the weekend, to talk things through. Emily nodded, played along, but inside she felt the walls tightening. Back in the shed, Buddy watched her, the scarf Lucy had made still tied around his neck. Emily lit a small flashlight and opened the notebook she'd hidden. She added a new entry, October 28th. He found the letter. "I don't know how. I think he's watching. I feel like there's a camera somewhere. I made a mistake, but it's not too late. Not yet. I'm going to pretend. Let him think he won. But I'm going to run. And when I do, Buddy's coming with me." The wind howled through the trees like a warning, that evening thrashing golden leaves against the windows as twilight slipped quietly into night. Asheville was unseasonably cold for late October, and the gray sky stretched endlessly above like a lid pressed over the town. Emily stood at the sink washing a plate, her fingers trembling beneath the warm water. She had smiled through dinner, complimented Derek's shirt, even laughed at a dull story he told about a coworker's miswired attic fan. She was playing her part perfectly. But she knew something was coming. She had seen it in the sharpness of his eyes, the way he had smiled too easily, lingered too long in silence, like a predator waiting for the exact second to strike. At 8:12 p.m. it happened. Emily stepped out to take the trash to the bins near the shed. Her cast bumped the door frame as she walked, and the sudden motion caused the folded note from Michelle tucked secretly into her sweater pocket since that morning to flutter to the ground. She didn't notice it at first, but Derek, watching from the kitchen window, did. He was outside in seconds. "What is that?" he snapped, voice cutting through the cold like broken glass. Emily turned, heart-dropping. "It's nothing." He reached down, picked it up, and unfolded it slowly. The note was short. "Bus arrives 4:45 p.m. Friday. Will be waiting. M." His face darkened. "You lying bitch, Derek, please." The slap came so fast she didn't register it until she was on her knees. Gravel bit into her palms. The second blow knocked her sideways. Her ribs cracked hard against the brick border of the garden bed. Pain bloomed through her side like wildfire. Buddy barked. Once, sharp, urgent. From inside the shed, he had heard everything. Derek grabbed Emily by the collar of her coat, dragging her toward the yard center. "You think you can leave me," he spat. "You think you can run and everyone will just believe you? You're nothing without me." Emily choked out a sob. "Please stop." He raised his fist again. That's when the shed door burst open. The wood cracked loud enough to echo down the block. Buddy, no longer the quiet shadow of a dog, exploded out into the yard like a force of nature. His coat gleamed in the moonlight, his frame powerful but lean. His tail was rigid, ears forward, and his lips curled into a low growl that vibrated in the air. Derek froze mid-motion. Buddy stepped between them, planting himself squarely in front of Emily, head lowered, body coiled, his growl rising to a steady, pulsing rhythm. He didn't lunge, didn't bark again, but he didn't move either. The message was clear: one more step, and there would be consequences. From the second-floor window of the Marstons' house next door, Lucy stared in horror. Her mother had gone to the late shift at the diner. The girl pressed her hands to the glass, her breath fogging it up, then backed away quickly. She grabbed the phone, her mother's old cordless landline, and punched 3 numbers with shaking fingers. 911, what is your emergency? There's a man hurting someone next door. Lucy's voice cracked. He's hitting her, and a dog just saved her. What's your name, sweetheart? Lucy Marston. Please hurry. Across town. Officer Jacob Wells was 2 blocks away when the call came through. He swerved his patrol car onto Sycamore Lane, sirens off but lights flashing faintly, casting red and blue shadows across the autumn dark streets. When he pulled up to the Parker residence, the front door was ajar. He followed the sounds, low growling, panicked breathing, a man cursing, and turned the corner into the backyard. The scene stopped him in his tracks. Emily lay crumpled on the ground, face bruised and sleeve torn, blood on her lip. Derek stood several feet away, frozen, and standing between them, still as a statue, was a German shepherd, black and tan, lean but formidable, his body locked in a protective stance. "Step back," Jacob barked, drawing his weapon. "Sir, get your hands in the air." Derek turned, sneering. "This isn't your business, officer. This is my wife." Jacob's voice hardened. "It became my business when you decided to use her as a punching bag." Derek laughed bitterly, but slowly raised his hands. Buddy didn't move. Jacob holstered his gun and pulled out his radio. "We've got a domestic violence suspect in custody. Female victim on scene, possible concussion or fractured ribs. Get paramedics here now." Emily groaned as she tried to sit up. "Buddy," she whispered. Jacob knelt beside her, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "Don't move too much, Emily. Help's coming." Buddy finally relaxed, though he kept one eye on Derek, who now sat handcuffed on the patio steps, muttering curses under his breath. Jacob glanced at the dog, impressed. Where the hell did he come from? Emily smiled weakly. He found me. Or maybe I found him. Later, after the ambulance arrived and Emily was carefully loaded inside, Jacob walked over to Buddy, who sat by the edge of the shed. His scarf, the one Lucy had knitted, was slightly torn but still wrapped proudly around his neck. "You did good," Jacob murmured. Buddy tilted his head as if accepting the compliment. Jacob turned to the young female paramedic who had just joined the force, Tanya Grant, petite, dark-skinned, with quick hands and a calming voice. "Make sure someone rides with the dog. He's part of this now." Tanya chuckled. "Looks like he saved her life." "Yeah," Jacob said quietly, and made sure I saw it. The courthouse in downtown Asheville stood like a cold monument of gray stone and solemn rules. On the morning of the trial, clouds hung low in the sky, pregnant with a storm that refused to fall. Rain hadn't yet broken, but the air was thick, and Emily Parker could feel the weight of it in her lungs as she stepped out of Officer Jacob Wells's patrol car. Emily wore a soft navy blouse with long sleeves and black slacks. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and a faint trace of concealer masked the fading bruises on her cheekbone. Her frame was thinner than it had been a month ago, and though her hands trembled slightly, there was a calmness in her eyes. It wasn't confidence exactly, it was a quiet certainty. She was not alone. Beside her, walking close and steady, was Buddy. He had been bathed the night before and brushed until his coat shone like polished wood. The blue and white knitted scarf still hung loosely around his neck. Officer Jacob had argued personally to allow him in the courthouse not as a stunt, but as part of evidence and emotional support. The judge, a stern but progressive woman named Honorable Valerie Hightower, had granted it. Judge Hightower was in her early 60s, tall, with deep brown skin, silver-streaked hair twisted into a low bun, and eyes that missed nothing. Known for her no-nonsense courtroom demeanor and years working in family court before circuit appointments, she had an unspoken empathy for domestic violence victims, but never let emotion override evidence. As Emily entered the courtroom, she spotted Derek seated with his attorney. Derek wore a sharp charcoal suit and a faint smirk. His beard was neatly trimmed, his posture relaxed, almost smug. His lawyer, Mr. Victor Ramsey, was an older man with sharp features, thinning hair, and a voice that slid through the air like oil. He had a reputation for twisting facts and exploiting any shred of doubt. Emily took her place beside her own attorney, Clarissa Dale, a petite redhead in her 40s with a steel-spined demeanor. Clarissa had a background in trauma advocacy and was known for her calm, strategic mind in emotionally charged cases. The first few hours dragged on. Officer Jacob testified first, recounting what he saw the night of the assault. His voice was steady, though he paused slightly when describing Emily's injuries. Then came Martha, the kind grocery store clerk with warm eyes and a southern accent, who testified to seeing bruises on Emily over several months, often dismissed as accidents. Next, Lucy Marston was brought in, flanked by her mother, Monica. Lucy wore a pale pink dress and clutched a worn teddy bear. Her testimony was soft but clear. She told the court what she saw from her window. She talked about hearing Emily cry. She spoke about Buddy breaking through the shed. When Victor Ramsey cross-examined her, his tone took on a condescending chill. "Lucy, you said you saw Mr. Hall hit Mrs. Parker, but you're only 7 years old. Is it possible you misunderstood what you saw?" Lucy didn't blink. "He hit her like my daddy used to hit my mommy. I remember what that looks like." A hush fell over the courtroom. Ramsey backed off. Then it was Emily's turn. Clarissa walked her gently through the testimony. Emily spoke softly but with clarity, her voice growing steadier as she described the months of control, the isolation, the bruises. She explained how Derek had hidden cameras, how he took her phone, and how she had hidden her journal beneath the floorboards of the shed. Then Clarissa presented the journal. Each entry was time-stamped. Some had dates that matched her visits to the ER. Photographs were shown of her bruises, medical records entered into evidence. The atmosphere in the courtroom changed from skepticism to realization. Victor Ramsey rose slowly. "Ms. Parker," he began pacing in front of the jury, "you say you feared for your life, yet you chose to stay, for months. Doesn't that suggest some level of emotional instability, perhaps exaggeration?" Clarissa stood. Objection. Argumentative and implying diagnosis without credentials. "Sustained," said Judge Hightower, frowning. But Ramsey wasn't finished. "Ms. Parker, you claim to have kept this dog hidden for protection. A stray, no history. How convenient. Are we to believe that this dog simply knew to protect you?" Buddy, lying quietly beside Emily's chair, shifted. Ramsey smirked. "Perhaps the dog has better instincts than his owner." Buddy stood. He didn't bark, didn't growl loudly. He just stepped forward, shoulders high, body tense, and emitted the lowest, coldest rumble of warning the courtroom had ever heard. His eyes locked on Ramsey, and in that moment the entire room fell silent. One juror gasped, another dropped her pen. Ramsey froze mid-sentence. Judge Hightower raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Ramsey, it appears the dog disagrees." Laughter rippled gently through the room, but it wasn't mockery. It was relief. The dog had done what many wished they could told the truth without saying a word. Emily placed a hand gently on Buddy's back. He returned to her side and sat down, never taking his eyes off Ramsey. Clarissa smiled faintly. No further questions. Emily took a breath, then looked across the courtroom. Derek watched her with narrowed eyes. She didn't flinch. For the first time in years, she met his gaze full on. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," she said clearly. Her voice carried across the marble walls, quiet but thunderous. The crisp November wind swept through downtown Asheville like a call to awakening. Leaves, now brittle and amber, skittered across the courthouse steps, brushing against shoes of journalists, activists, and silent onlookers gathered in small, huddled circles. A week had passed since the trial, but the reverberations were just beginning. What started as a case of domestic violence had ignited something deeper, something long buried under small-town silence and unspoken fear. The headline on the Asheville Tribune read, "Dog Diary and a Woman's Courage, Parker versus Hall Sparks, Local Uproar." Below it was a photo of Emily exiting the courthouse, her hand resting on Buddy's head, eyes steady despite the storm around her. Inside the police station, Officer Jacob Wells stood at a bulletin board pinning a flyer titled Buddy Shield. His normally calm face was lit with rare determination. The flyer read, "Protect, Empower, Rebuild." A community initiative to support victims of domestic abuse, offering shelter, legal aid, emotional counseling, and a confidential network of trained responders. Initiated by Officer Jacob Wells, named in honor of the German Shepherd who stood between violence and survival. Jacob was not a man who often sought the spotlight. In his late 30s, tall with wide shoulders and a weather-worn face, he had spent most of his career quietly handling traffic violations and neighborhood disputes. But something about the Parker case had cracked a part of him open. His own sister Janine had died 10 years ago in a silent battle she never told anyone about. Watching Buddy protect Emily had awakened a responsibility in him too long ignored. The morning after the verdict, 3 women came forward. First was Kara Vincent, 32, a former barista at Brew Hollow. Tall and wiry with cropped blonde hair and a skeptical stare, she gave her statement through clenched teeth. "Derek used to follow me after shifts, said I smiled too much at other men. I reported it. They said he was just being friendly. That was 2 years ago." Then Marla Dempsey, 45, owner of a florist shop on Chestnut Street, confessed she once had to change her locks. "He cornered me behind my shop after I rejected him. Told me no one would believe me because he's Mr. Hall, the town's hero electrician. Her voice cracked. So I stayed quiet. Finally, there was Yvonne Tran, a Vietnamese-American woman in her late 20s with soft features and an anxious gaze. She'd moved to Asheville 5 years earlier and barely spoke to neighbors. She showed the officers a restraining order she had tried to file, but it was resolved internally, marked with the signature of a retired police captain, Derek's former drinking buddy. The mayor's office was flooded with angry emails. By Thursday, the police chief Cheryl O'Malley, a no-nonsense black woman with graying temples and a reputation for reform, called for a full internal audit. She stood before local media and read a brief but damning statement. "We have failed to protect our community from repeat abuse due to internal negligence and unprofessional bias. Effective immediately, all past allegations involving Derek Hall and any unresolved domestic abuse reports over the last 10 years will be reopened for full investigation." Meanwhile, Emily sat by the lake at the edge of town. Buddy lay beside her, his head resting on her boot. The lake shimmered under a pale morning sun, quiet but alive. She hadn't spoken to the press despite over a dozen requests. But she had spoken with Michelle Daly, and Lucy had come by with a new drawing, a picture of Buddy wearing a superhero cape. Emily was still healing. Her ribs ached, her cast itched, and nightmares still visited. But something was shifting. For the first time, the silence didn't feel like a prison. It felt like a moment to choose. That afternoon, Jacob called. "They're asking for you to speak," he said gently. "The Buddy Shield network is real now. We've got 6 volunteers already. A shelter just pledged 2 beds for emergency cases. It's moving. People are listening." Emily was quiet for a moment. "I'm not strong like that." "You stood in court with broken ribs and a diary," Jacob replied. "That's more than strong." She exhaled, her hand curling into Buddy's fur. "Maybe, but only if Buddy comes too." Jacob laughed. "He's already on the flyer." The first public event was small, just a community circle in the town library's basement. Emily wore a loose gray sweater and stood at the center with Clarissa Dale by her side. The attendees were a mix of women, a few men, a counselor, and a high school teacher. Emily looked around, unsure how to start. Then Buddy barked once, quiet, encouraging, and she spoke. "I'm not here because I was brave. I'm here because I was afraid for too long. And because a dog I didn't know believed in me more than I believed in myself." The room was silent. Someone in the back sniffled. "I don't want to be anyone's hero," she said. "But if my story keeps someone else from hiding bruises under long sleeves or apologizing for something that was never their fault, then maybe it's worth it." Buddy leaned into her leg and she smiled. The air in Asheville had shifted. Winter was receding, reluctantly giving way to the promise of spring. Pale green buds emerged on the edge of skeletal branches, and soft golden sunlight pooled on the cracked sidewalks like quiet hope. A month had passed since the trial ended, and in that time something remarkable had taken root in Emily's life: peace. The verdict had been read aloud in a courtroom, hushed with anticipation. 5 years in state prison for Derek Hall, convicted on counts of aggravated assault, harassment, and violating a protective order. He didn't flinch at the sentencing. He didn't look at Emily. That perhaps was his final act of defiance, refusing to acknowledge what he'd lost. But she didn't need his acknowledgement anymore. The truth had been spoken. Justice had a face, and it bore the quiet strength of every woman who dared to stand up. Now, Emily lived in a modest single-story cottage on the western edge of Asheville, near the boundary where neighborhoods gave way to woodland. The house had been built in the 70s, stone foundation, pale blue shutters, and a front porch with peeling white paint. But it was hers. It had a fenced-in backyard and a sunlit kitchen, and at night she could hear owls from the forest calling to each other like old souls trading secrets. And then there was Buddy. Buddy had officially become hers, papers signed, microchip updated, and collar replaced with one bearing a simple silver tag, Buddy Parker, forever home. He slept at the foot of her bed, now no longer confined to a shed or hidden from sight. During the day, he had a favorite spot near the fireplace where he sprawled out like a lion, and watch the world from behind half-lidded eyes. Buddy was different now, not because he'd changed, but because he was finally safe. He still had the scars on his hind legs, a faint limp that surfaced when he ran too far, but his posture had straightened. He greeted visitors without flinching and barked only when someone truly unusual approached. He was no longer just a stray. He was a guardian, a partner, and some might argue a healer. Emily had returned to work part-time at St. Catherine's Children's Hospital, a warm-toned brick building nestled near the heart of Asheville. The pediatric ward welcomed her back with quiet hugs and cautious glances. They had seen the news, of course. But Emily didn't shrink from their eyes. She walked in with her badge clipped to a clean white coat, and with Buddy trotting beside her, tail swaying. Initially, the hospital administration had hesitated to allow a dog in the children's ward. But Dr. Helena Morse, the hospital director, a tall, broad-shouldered woman in her 50s with short gray curls and motherly authority, overrode the concerns. "If this dog helped that woman survive what she's been through," Helena said during the staff meeting, "then I'd say he's more qualified to be here than half the board." Buddy didn't disappoint. He didn't bark, didn't jump, didn't lick anyone unless invited. He moved like he understood who needed him the most. A 6-year-old boy undergoing chemotherapy curled up against Buddy's side and fell asleep for the first time in days. A little girl with autism whispered her first full sentence into Buddy's ear. Nurses started calling him Dr. Buddy, and the nickname stuck. Back at home, Emily's days found rhythm. Mornings started with walks through the woods behind the cottage. Buddy would run ahead, chasing squirrels and sniffing leaves, always doubling back every few minutes to make sure Emily was still close. Sometimes she brought a thermos of coffee and a journal to write beneath a tall cedar. Her entries were no longer about fear. They were about rebuilding. One rainy Saturday morning, Lucy arrived with her mother, Monica. Monica, still juggling 2 jobs, looked worn but brighter than before. She'd grown to trust Emily deeply, and the 2 women often sat at the kitchen table trading stories, laughing about things that had nothing to do with courtrooms or police reports. Lucy ran straight to Buddy as usual, wrapping her arms around his neck and kissing the top of his head. "I made you something," she said proudly, pulling a slightly crumpled piece of paper from her jacket pocket. It was a drawing crayon and watercolor. Buddy stood in front of a castle wearing a superhero cape and a crown. Next to him stood Emily, smiling with her hands on her hips. Over their heads was a hand-lettered banner that read, "The Kingdom of Safe." Emily teared up despite herself. She hugged Lucy tightly. "You're quite the artist." "I'm going to make a book," Lucy said seriously. "It'll be about Buddy saving people. Chapter 1 is called The Day He Met You." One afternoon, Clarissa Dale visited the house with a small potted hydrangea and a stack of manila folders. "Thought you might like to see this," she said, setting down a binder labeled Buddy Shield Quarterly Report. Emily flipped through it. Dozens of names, new volunteers, a list of shelters in collaboration, a photograph of a new hotline billboard that read, "You are not alone. Buddy's watching." "I heard they want you to speak at the county fundraiser next month," Clarissa said. Emily shook her head, but she was smiling. "Only if Buddy gets the microphone first." They both laughed. That night, Emily sat on the porch with a blanket over her knees. Buddy lay beside her ears, twitching at the rustle of wind through the trees. The stars blinked above, shy and gentle. "Thank you," she whispered, more to the wind than to anyone in particular. Buddy rested his head on her foot, eyes half closed. The road had been cruel, but this home, this life, was a soft landing, and they had made it there together. The morning sun filtered through the tall arched windows of the Asheville Civic Center, casting golden light across rows of folding chairs and polished wooden floors. On the stage, a simple podium stood beneath a banner that read, "Rise and Reclaim Annual Women's Empowerment Fundraiser." The hall buzzed with soft conversation, the occasional clink of coffee cups and the shuffling of pamphlets. In the front row, a German shepherd with a silver-streaked muzzle sat quietly, his posture regal, his eyes alert despite his age. He wore a navy blue bandana with the words "Retired Hero" embroidered in white. This was Buddy's first time attending a public event in months. Emily Parker stood backstage, her palms slightly damp, her heart beating faster than she cared to admit. 1 year, a full rotation of seasons since the trial, since the cottage, since the first step into freedom. And now here she was, no longer hiding, no longer afraid, and no longer alone. She wore a soft teal dress that hugged her tall frame without clinging her ash-blonde hair now cut into a neat shoulder-length bob. Her posture had changed, shoulders relaxed, chin lifted, eyes clear. There were still moments when the past whispered behind her, but they no longer defined her. Clarissa Dale, now the assistant director of the Buddy Shield Foundation, stood beside her clipboard in hand. "They're ready for you," she whispered with a supportive smile. Clarissa, once Emily's court-appointed advocate, had grown into a trusted friend, wiry, focused, and fiercely compassionate. Today her lips were painted berry red, her dark hair pulled into a sleek bun. Emily took a breath. "Let's do it." As she stepped onto the stage, the room fell into a hush. The spotlight was warm on her skin. Buddy padded behind her and curled at her feet, his body a silent monument of loyalty. Emily adjusted the microphone. "Thank you all for being here." She paused, eyes scanning the crowd. Some were strangers. Others, Officer Jacob Wells, Michelle flown in from Chicago. Even young Lucy sitting next to her mom, clutching a framed drawing, were the anchors that had held her steady through the storm. "I never thought I'd be the one standing here," she began, her voice steady. "For years, I thought silence was strength. I thought survival meant hiding the bruises and pretending everything was okay." She glanced down at Buddy, who blinked slowly, then looked back at the audience. But one day a dog looked at me, and in his eyes I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. I saw myself, not the broken version of me, not the afraid one. The real me, the one who wanted to fight, the one who wanted to live. A tear rolled down a woman's cheek in the third row. I didn't survive because I was brave every moment. I survived because at my lowest, someone, or in this case some dog, believed I was worth saving. Soft laughter rippled across the room. In the past year, I've been rebuilding. I moved into a house where laughter echoes louder than memories. I returned to the pediatric ward. I drank hot tea on rainy days and watched Buddy chase butterflies in spring. And I wrote. Emily reached into her bag and held up a book, The Look That Saved Me. It's not just my story. It's the story of every woman who's ever been told to stay quiet. Every survivor who found her way back to herself, sometimes in a courtroom, sometimes in a shelter, sometimes through the gentle presence of a friend with 4 legs. Applause swelled some standing. I share this today because we are not meant to carry our pain alone. We were never meant to heal in the dark. She looked down at Buddy again. He's retired now, mostly naps, sunbathes, and guards the porch from the occasional squirrel invasion. But he still watches me with those same eyes. And when I forget who I am, they remind me. She closed the speech with a soft, heartfelt line. Home is not the place you hide. It's the place where you get to be seen and loved for who you truly are. Applause thundered through the Civic Center. Emily stepped down and knelt beside Buddy, stroking his fur. He leaned into her hand, a low, happy huff escaping his chest. Later that evening, back at the cottage, golden light poured through the living room windows. The wooden shelves now held books, framed photos, and little watercolor drawings, many of them signed Lucy. The once silent rooms rang with the scent of soup on the stove, the hum of a kettle, and the soft thump of Buddy's tail against the couch as he dozed. Michelle lounged in the armchair by the fireplace, a travel bag at her feet. "Your speech made me cry," she said, blowing into a mug of tea. "And I don't cry," Emily laughed. "You cried when the Cubs lost. That was different. That was baseball heartbreak. This was full-on soul punch." Buddy snored softly, sprawled on his rug like a lion who'd finally laid down his burden. Emily walked to the window and looked out. The moon was rising round and gentle. The forest whispered with wind and memory. She turned back to Buddy. "Because of you," she said softly, "I learned that home isn't just a shelter from harm. It's the place where you finally stop apologizing for breathing." Buddy opened one eye, blinked, and wagged his tail. Emily smiled. "Thanks for finding me." In the quiet journey of Emily and her loyal dog Buddy, we are reminded that miracles do not always come wrapped in thunder or lightning. Sometimes they arrive in the form of a gentle paw, a watchful gaze, or the silent presence of someone who refuses to leave your side. What saved Emily was not just a shelter, a courtroom, or even her own strength. It was love, the kind that God places into this world through the most unexpected messengers. Buddy was more than a stray dog. He was an answer to a prayer she had not dared to speak out loud. And maybe, just maybe, God sometimes sends angels with fur instead of wings. This story teaches us that even in our darkest valleys, God is working quietly behind the scenes. He sees us. He prepares the way. He places a buddy in our lives when we need it most, a reminder that we are not alone and never forgotten. So if you are struggling, if your heart is tired and your soul is worn down, please hold on. Your miracle might be on its way, walking on 4 legs, waiting at your doorstep, or simply arriving through the kindness of another person. If this story touched your heart, write amen in the comments as a prayer for all those who are still waiting for their healing. Have you ever met a buddy in your life, someone or something that helped you when you were at your lowest? Share your story in the comments. You never know who might need to hear it. Remember to subscribe to the channel for more stories of hope, healing, and second chances. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that they matter and that love can still find them. Let us not only tell stories, let us build faith together. May God bless you and keep you always.